With spring just around the corner, now's the perfect time to think about dividing or repotting your carnivorous plants. Maybe it's been a while since you're giving your plants some fresh peat moss, or maybe your plants are getting crowded in their pots. Either way, in winter or early spring is the best time to divide or repot your plants. So for those of you who don't know, Venus Flytraps and North American pitcher plants go dormant in winter. They basically fall asleep. So in winter is a good time to divide or repot, or when they're just about to awaken out of their dormancy. And I know that this North American pitcher plant is awakening because it's producing these flower buds right here. It's important to understand that when you're dividing or repotting, that it's quite a stressful time for your plants. The best way to minimize the stress on your plant is by doing what you've got to do as quickly and as properly as possible. And the best way to do that is by having your work area ready and having your tools and equipment on hand so you can do what you've got to do as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, it's all about giving your plants the best start for the growing season ahead. Alright, so here's a rundown of the tools and equipment that I use to repot or divide my carnivorous plants. Got a watering can over here which I use to fill up my water trays with. I just use these water trays to place the pots into to ensure that the peat moss is nice and damp after they've been repotted, and also putting in the top layers of those pots, and this watering can just makes that job a lot easier. I've got a spray bottle over here with methylated spirits, and I use the methylated spirits to sanitize all the blades that I use to cut the plants with. And I only do this from plant to plant. You don't have to do this every time you use your blades. And by sanitizing your blades, it just ensures that you're minimizing any spread of pathogens from plant to plant. Okay? And the way I sanitize my blades is simply by spraying this tissue and then wiping down the blades. Got a pair of scissors over here which I use to remove the top section after those plants have been unpotted. That's what I've done here, just remove those top layers, and I've just placed that into this water tray over here, and then I just use the spray, or sorry, not the spray bottle, the watering can, just to ensure that those top layers don't dry out. I've got a set of secateurs here which I use to cut the rhizomes with. Sometimes these rhizomes get quite woody, so it really does help to have a good set of secateurs to ensure a nice clean cut. Over here I've got a hacksaw blade. Sometimes these North American pitcher plants can get quite crowded and very woody, and sometimes those secateurs don't get wide enough to be able to cut into those rhizomes, and this hacksaw blade really does help to cut into those rhizomes to ensure a nice clean cut. I've got my freshly cleaned pots that I use to place my divided rhizomes into. I always make sure that the pots are nice and clean. I just place these under a tap, and I just use this brush over here to give them a good clean on the inside, on the bottom, and also under the rim of the pots. Sometimes you get pests like scale hiding under there, and by giving them a good clean, it just gives you that confidence knowing that your pots are nice and clean and free of any pests. Okay, I've got my plants over here which I'm going to be dividing. This is a North American pitcher plant, and as I said earlier, it's finished its dormancy period, and you can tell by this flower bud which is trying to get out, and you can see how the rhizome here is right up against the edge of the pot where there's not much room to grow, so this plant needs to be divided urgently. Over here I've got a Venus Flytrap which I'm going to be dividing and placing those rhizomes into separate pots. Over here I've got a polystyrene box. So basically all I do is I just unpot the rhizomes, and then I just shake off any peat moss into this box. Of course, you can use any container you like for this. After I've removed any excess peat moss from the roots, I just place the root ball into this bucket of water just to help me remove any more excess peat moss around those roots. Of course, I've got a bucket here of freshly blended peat moss with propagating sand. It's 3 parts peat moss to 1 part propagating sand. And of course, I've got my scoop over here. If you're looking for some good quality peat moss blend, go and visit my online shop and have a look there. Start by loosening the pot around the peat moss. If your plant already has flower buds, you may want to remove them first before unpotting. Flower buds tend to draw energy out of the plant and can be removed. Make sure you don't accidentally cut off any new leaves which have a pointed shape. Flower buds are large and round. Form a dome shape with your hand to avoid damaging the plant, and with your fingers on the rim of the pot, gently remove the root ball. Gently use the blade of your scissors to remove any top layer of peat moss. Remove any loose peat moss around the roots with your fingers. Shake off any excess peat moss. Gently remove roots which are stuck together. Plunge the root ball into the bucket of water to rinse and wash the roots. Give the roots a further clean by washing under a tap. This step is entirely optional, but I like to rinse the roots with rainwater or other soft water. Start by feeling around for any loose rhizomes. If possible, remove them by hand. With the peat moss removed, you should be able to see clear sections of rhizome growing from the main branch. Look for large woody sections of rhizome, as you can see right here. Removing this woody section will help you to separate the rhizomes. Here I'm cutting off the woody section, making sure my blades are in between the rhizomes. The white coloured, freshly cut rhizome indicates healthy tissue. Remove any brown sections with your snips. Gently separate the sections of rhizome. Here you can see the woody section directly attached to the fresh rhizome. A good place to cut is directly down the centre. Try to only cut the rhizome without cutting the roots below. I've decided to throw away this woody clump, even though there's a small green shoot on top. There's still some stubborn stains of peat moss around the roots, so I'm going to wash the rhizome under the tap. Look for and remove any loose sections of roots. Into about a third of the pot, add fresh peat moss. Holding the tip of the rhizome with one hand, start filling in peat moss into the pot. Give the pot a good couple of shakes to settle in the peat moss around the roots. Place the freshly potted plant into a tray of soft water to allow the peat moss to dampen. For a neater look, you may want to rinse the tip of the rhizome with soft water.